There are ruthless lessons about life that once you learn them, they make you dangerously smart. This isn't the kind of intelligence schools teach you. This is harsh wisdom that can see through the real nature of people and the world. Most people avoid these lessons because they destroy the comfortable illusions they need to feel safe. They prefer to believe the world is fair, everyone is fundamentally good, and hard work always pays off. But the truth is far more ruthless than that. When you truly understand these lessons, you become dangerous because you can no longer be deceived, manipulated, or live with naive expectations. You see reality as it actually is, and that gives you enormous advantage over people who are still living in a dream. What's important is that I'm not teaching you how to be ruthless with others, but how to be ruthless with your own illusions. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful emperor in the ancient world, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. He understood that true intelligence comes from seeing truth without filters or wishful thinking. The Stoic philosophers mastered this kind of dangerous intelligence. They understood human nature, could predict behavior, and were never surprised by betrayal or disappointment because they saw these things coming from miles away. The difference between ordinary intelligence and dangerous intelligence is that ordinary intelligence helps you solve problems, while dangerous intelligence helps you see problems before they become problems. It helps you understand what people really want, what they're actually doing, and why they behave the way they do. Today I'm sharing 8 ruthless lessons that will make you dangerously smart. The 6th lesson will completely change how you see every person in your life. These aren't comfortable truths, but mastering them will give you the kind of mental clarity and strategic wisdom that most people completely lack. Are you ready to become dangerously intelligent? Lesson number 1. Most people are ruled by their emotions, not logic. Understanding this gives you enormous advantage in every interaction. The vast majority of people make decisions based on emotions, fear, desire, ego, insecurity, then use logic to justify choices they've already made emotionally. When you grasp this fundamental truth about human nature, you can predict behavior, avoid manipulation, and make truly rational decisions yourself. I watched this play out during a family dinner when my cousin announced he was buying a $60,000 truck. When his dad questioned the financial wisdom, my cousin immediately started rattling off logical justifications. It holds its value better. I need it for work. It's more reliable than my current car. But I could see what was really happening. He wanted that truck because it made him feel successful and powerful. The logic came after the emotional decision was already made. His father kept attacking the logic, pointing out he worked in an office, that a reliable sedan would serve him better, that the payments would strain his budget. They argued for an hour, but the dad was fighting the wrong battle. My cousin wasn't thinking rationally about transportation. He was emotionally invested in how that truck made him feel about himself. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle deeply, writing extensively about the difference between emotional reactions and rational responses. He observed that most people are slaves to their immediate feelings, while the wise person learns to observe emotions without being controlled by them. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This doesn't mean emotions are bad. They provide valuable information about what matters to us. But the Stoics understood that decisions made purely from emotion often lead to regret, while decisions that consider emotions but aren't controlled by them tend to be wiser. The dangerous intelligence comes from recognizing this pattern everywhere. In arguments, people aren't really debating facts. They're defending their ego or expressing frustration. When someone gets defensive about their expensive coffee habit, they're not defending caffeine, they're defending their right to small luxuries. When co-workers resist new procedures, they're often not opposing efficiency, they're feeling threatened or unheard. You can influence outcomes by understanding what emotions are really driving people's positions. Instead of attacking my cousin's logic, I might have said, "That's a beautiful truck. You must feel good driving something that reflects your success." Acknowledging the emotional need often opens space for rational discussion. The Stoic practice is developing the pause between emotional trigger and response. When you feel anger, fear, or excitement, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now, and is it helping me think clearly about this situation? This simple question creates space for wisdom to operate. Epictetus taught that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control our responses. Most people react emotionally and then regret it later. Dangerous intelligence means responding thoughtfully and rarely having regrets. Emotional manipulation is everywhere once you see it. But our second lesson reveals something even more fundamental about what really drives human behavior. Lesson number 2. People will always act in their own self-interest. This isn't cynicism, it's reality. And understanding it protects you from disappointment and manipulation. Everyone acts according to what they believe serves their best interests, even when they appear to be selfless. Understanding this doesn't make you bitter. It makes you realistic about human motivation and better at predicting behavior. I learned this lesson watching my neighbor Sarah, who seemed incredibly generous. She was always organizing neighborhood events, bringing cookies to new families, and volunteering for the homeowners association. Everyone praised her selflessness and community spirit. I genuinely admired her until I realized what was really happening. Sarah was running for city council and needed name recognition in our district. Every generous act was strategically building relationships with potential voters. She remembered everyone's names, their kids' activities, their concerns about traffic or property values. When election season came, she had a network of people who saw her as the helpful neighbor who cared about the community. Was her help genuine? Absolutely. Did people benefit from her actions? Of course. But her motivation wasn't pure altruism. It was intelligent self-interest. Once I understood this, I could appreciate her strategy without feeling deceived by it. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, understood this principle perfectly. He wrote, "In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being." He knew that even his service to the empire served his own interests in being remembered as a virtuous leader and living according to his values. The Stoics taught that self-interest isn't inherently evil, it's natural and can even be virtuous when properly directed. Epictetus said we should understand people's motivations clearly so we can work with human nature rather than against it. Fighting self-interest is like fighting gravity, pointless and exhausting. The dangerous intelligence lies in asking the right question. What does this person really want from this situation? When your co-worker offers to help with your project, they might genuinely want to help, but they also might want to learn your methods, get credit for the success, or build a relationship for future favors. Understanding their true motivations helps you respond appropriately. This prevents disappointment when people prioritize their interests over yours. It's not personal, it's human nature. When someone doesn't follow through on promises, cancels plans, or makes decisions that seem selfish, you won't be shocked because you understood their priorities from the beginning. The key is aligning interests when possible. Instead of expecting people to act against their self-interest, find ways to make helping you serve their interests too. This creates sustainable relationships based on mutual benefit rather than one-sided sacrifice. Seneca practiced this wisdom in his business dealings and political relationships. He understood that lasting cooperation comes from structuring interactions where everyone benefits, not from expecting people to act against their nature. Self-interest explains most behavior, but our third lesson reveals why most people can't handle the truth about themselves. Lesson number 3. Most people can't handle the truth about themselves. This is why honest feedback is so rare and why most people remain stuck in the same patterns their entire lives. The majority of people have built elaborate mental defenses against uncomfortable truths about their character, abilities, and behavior. They surround themselves with people who reinforce their self-image rather than challenge them to grow. I saw this clearly with my friend Mike, who constantly complained about being passed over for promotions at work. He'd rant about office politics, unfair managers, and how hard work wasn't appreciated anymore. When I gently suggested that maybe his habit of showing up late, missing deadlines, and arguing with supervisors might be factors, he immediately became defensive. "You don't understand the situation," he said. "My boss has it out for me." He had an excuse for every observation I made. The chronic lateness was because of traffic. The missed deadlines were because he was given unrealistic expectations. The arguments were because he was standing up for what's right. Mike had created a narrative where he was the victim of circumstances beyond his control. Accepting responsibility for his role would have meant admitting he had power to change his situation, but also acknowledging his own contribution to his problems. It was psychologically easier to blame external forces. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated the opposite approach, practicing brutal self-examination in his personal writings. He constantly questioned his own motives, acknowledged his mistakes, and looked for ways to improve his character. He wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." The Stoics understood that growth requires the courage to see yourself clearly, including uncomfortable truths. They viewed self-deception as a form of slavery. You can't change what you won't acknowledge. This creates dangerous intelligence because you can predict people's blind spots and defensive reactions. When someone consistently blames external factors for their problems, you know they're not ready to change. When they surround themselves with yes people who never challenge them, you know they're protecting their ego over their growth. You'll recognize this pattern when people get defensive about feedback, make excuses instead of adjustments, or repeatedly face the same problems without seeing their role in creating them. They might say things like, "That's just how I am," or "You don't understand my situation," when confronted with patterns in their behavior. The Stoic practice is regular self-examination. Ask yourself, what truth about myself am I avoiding? What feedback am I dismissing too quickly? Where might I be deceiving myself? This takes courage because it's painful to acknowledge our flaws, but it's the only path to genuine improvement. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Growth requires ending the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about why we are the way we are. If you've learned to practice brutal self-honesty and can see your own patterns without making excuses, comment "ruthless truth" below to inspire others who are developing the courage to face uncomfortable realities about themselves. Self-deception keeps most people weak and predictable, but our fourth lesson reveals how they respond when someone threatens their comfortable illusions. Lesson number 4. Your success will make some people hate you. The higher you rise, the more people will try to tear you down, and it has nothing to do with you personally. Success inevitably creates enemies, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your achievements remind others of their own limitations and unfulfilled potential. Understanding this prepares you for inevitable hostility and keeps you from taking it personally. I watched this happen to my college roommate David after he started his tech company. In school, he was well-liked, funny, generous, always willing to help with assignments. But as his startup grew and he began appearing in local business magazines, old friendships started turning toxic. People who used to hang out with him regularly began making snide comments about how money changed him, or how he got lucky with timing. When he'd offer to pay for dinner, they'd make uncomfortable jokes about letting the rich guy handle it. Former friends started spreading stories about how he was always arrogant or thought he was better than everyone, none of which was true. The most painful part was that David hadn't changed at all. He was still the same generous, hard-working person, but his success had become a mirror reflecting their own unrealized dreams and excuses. Instead of being inspired by his achievement, they felt threatened by the evidence that success was possible because it implied their own lack of success was a choice. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly as emperor. Despite his efforts to rule justly and philosophically, he encountered endless criticism, plots, and betrayals from people who resented his position. He wrote, "Remember that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The Stoics understood that envy is one of the most destructive human emotions because it focuses entirely on what others have, rather than on personal growth. When people see your success, they have two choices: use it as inspiration to improve themselves, or tear you down to feel better about their position. The dangerous intelligence here is recognizing this pattern before it surprises you. As you achieve more, expect some relationships to become strained. People who were supportive when you were struggling may become hostile when you're thriving. This isn't a reflection of your character, it's a revelation of theirs. You'll see this in subtle, undermining, gossip campaigns designed to diminish your achievements or attempts to attribute your success to luck, connections, or circumstances rather than effort and skill. They might say things like, "must be nice," or "I could do that if I had his advantages." The Stoic response is to maintain your character regardless of others' reactions. Don't downplay your achievements to make others comfortable, but don't flaunt them unnecessarily either. Focus on continued growth and contribution rather than others' approval. Seneca, despite facing exile and constant political dangers, continued building wealth and influence while practicing philosophy. He understood that success attracts both admiration and hatred, but neither should control your actions. Success creates predictable enemies, but our fifth lesson reveals the hidden manipulations happening around you constantly. Lesson number 5. Everyone is trying to sell you something. Once you see this, you'll never look at interactions the same way again. Every interaction involves someone trying to influence you towards something, buying a product, accepting an idea, providing validation, giving attention, or making a commitment. Recognizing this constant influence allows you to make conscious choices rather than being unconsciously manipulated. I realized this during what I thought was a casual coffee with an old high school acquaintance, Jenny, who had reached out after years of no contact. She seemed genuinely interested in catching up, asking about my work, my family, remembering details from our past. I felt good about reconnecting with an old friend. 30 minutes into our conversation, she smoothly transitioned. "You know, I've been thinking about people like you who are doing well in their careers. I'm working with this amazing company that helps successful professionals build passive income streams." Suddenly, the entire interaction reframed itself. The friendly catch-up was a sales pitch for her multi-level marketing scheme. Jenny wasn't evil or calculating. She genuinely believed she was offering me an opportunity. But every question about my work, every compliment about my success, every shared memory had been building toward this moment. The friendship was the product packaging. The real product was her business opportunity. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by advisors, generals, and politicians all pushing their own agendas, wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." He understood that everyone who approached him wanted something, and maintaining clarity about their true motivations was essential for good decision-making. This doesn't make you paranoid. it makes you thoughtful. Your co-worker who compliments your project might genuinely appreciate your work, but they might also want you to support their proposal in the next meeting. Your neighbor who brings over cookies might enjoy being neighborly, but they might also want you to water their plants while they're on vacation. The dangerous intelligence comes from asking, what is this person really trying to get me to do, think, or feel? This awareness doesn't poison relationships. It clarifies them. When you understand what people want, you can decide consciously whether to give it to them. Epictetus taught that we should examine our judgments and not accept things at face value. The Stoics valued clear thinking over social pleasantness when it came to understanding reality. You'll recognize this everywhere once you're aware. The friend who only calls when they need help, the family member who brings up sensitive topics right before asking for favors, the colleague who agrees with everything you say before presenting their own ideas. These aren't necessarily manipulative people, they're just humans pursuing their interests through social interaction. The protection comes from conscious choice. When you see what someone is selling, you can decide whether to buy based on your own interests rather than their persuasion skills. Constant influence attempts are obvious once you see them, but our sixth lesson reveals something darker about human nature. Lesson number 6. People will show you who they are. Believe them. This lesson will change how you see every person in your life and save you from countless disappointments. People consistently reveal their true character through small actions, casual comments, and how they treat others when they think no one important is watching. Most people ignore these signals because they want to believe the best about others, leading to predictable disappointments. I learned this the hard way with my business partner, Alex. During our first few months working together, I noticed small things that bothered me, but dismissed them as unimportant. He would take slightly more credit than deserved in client meetings, pad his expense reports with questionable items, and make promises to team members that he'd later forget or ignore. Each time, I made excuses for him. He's just enthusiastic about the business, I told myself when he exaggerated his contributions. Everyone stretches expense reports a bit, I rationalized when I saw the luxury hotel charges for what should have been a day trip. He's busy and forgets things, I explained when employees complained about broken promises. 2 years later, when I discovered Alex had been secretly negotiating to sell our company without my knowledge while keeping all the profit for himself, I realized all the warning signs had been there from the beginning. His character had been consistent. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Maya Angelou famously said, "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply, writing about judging people by their actions over extended time rather than their words or occasional good deeds. He observed that character is revealed through consistent patterns, not isolated incidents. The Stoics valued truth over hope when it came to assessing people. They understood that most individuals don't fundamentally change their character. They simply reveal more of it as circumstances change and pressures increase. This creates dangerous intelligence because you can predict future behavior by paying attention to present patterns. When someone consistently treats service workers rudely, they'll eventually treat you rudely when you can't benefit them. When someone regularly breaks small promises, they'll break big ones. When someone gossips about absent friends, they gossip about you when you're not there. The warning signals are always there: how they handle money when no one's checking, how they speak about people who can't help them, whether they keep commitments when it's inconvenient, how they react when they don't get their way, and whether their words consistently match their actions. Seneca wrote about the importance of choosing companions carefully because we become like the people we spend time with. He understood that hoping people will change their fundamental nature is a losing strategy. The practical application is ruthless. Trust patterns over promises, consistency over explanations, and actions over words. When someone shows you they're unreliable, selfish, or dishonest, even in small ways, believe them and adjust your expectations accordingly. If you've learned to pay attention to people's consistent patterns rather than their promises and explanations, comment, "Believe the patterns" below to remind others that character reveals itself through actions, not words. Character patterns reveal future behavior with frightening accuracy, but our seventh lesson shows why most people never reach their potential. Lesson number 7. Comfort is the enemy of growth. The moment you get comfortable, you start dying intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Comfort zones are psychological prisons that most people mistake for safety. Real growth, strength, and intelligence develop only through challenge, discomfort, and confronting things that initially seem difficult or impossible. I saw this clearly with my neighbor Tom, a brilliant software engineer who had found the perfect job. Great salary, flexible hours, respected by his team, and tasks that came easily to him. For 3 years, he was living the dream, comfortable, secure, and stress-free. But something subtle was happening that he didn't recognize until it was almost too late. Tom started to notice his mind felt sluggish. Conversations that used to energize him felt boring. New technologies that should have excited him felt overwhelming. He realized he hadn't learned anything genuinely challenging in years. His comfort had become a trap that was slowly making him mentally soft and professionally obsolete. When his company downsized and eliminated his position, Tom discovered how dangerous comfort had been. In job interviews, he struggled to demonstrate recent growth or learning. His skills had stagnated while the industry moved forward. The safety he thought he had built was actually vulnerability disguised as security. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle deeply. As emperor, he could have lived in luxury and ease, but he deliberately chose the hardships of military campaigns and philosophical challenges. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work,' as a human being." He knew that avoiding difficulty was avoiding growth. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort to build resilience and character. They would sleep on hard floors, eat simple foods, and deliberately put themselves in challenging situations. This wasn't masochism. It was training for life's inevitable difficulties. The dangerous intelligence here is recognizing that while others avoid discomfort and remain weak, you can accelerate your development by deliberately choosing challenges that stretch your capabilities. Every skill that intimidates you is a skill that could transform your life once mastered. Comfort kills more dreams than failure ever will. When you're comfortable, you stop taking risks, stop learning, stop pushing boundaries. You become predictable, replaceable, and boring, even to yourself. You'll see this pattern everywhere. The successful professional who stops learning new skills and gets replaced by someone hungrier. The athlete who stops training hard and loses to competitors who are still growing. The relationship that becomes so routine, it dies from lack of challenge and growth. Epictetus, who experienced both slavery and freedom, taught that we should embrace difficulties as opportunities to develop virtue. He said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." True wealth is the ability to handle whatever life throws at you. The Stoic practice is regularly asking, what am I avoiding because it seems difficult? What skills would accelerate my progress if I developed them? Where am I choosing safety over growth? Comfort keeps most people weak and stagnant, but our final lesson reveals the ultimate truth that puts everything in perspective. Lesson number 8. You're going to die, and most of your worries are meaningless. This final lesson puts everything in perspective and eliminates most sources of anxiety and confusion. Death is the only certainty, and this awareness should eliminate most of your daily anxieties about social approval, minor setbacks, and petty conflicts. When you truly accept mortality, You gain dangerous clarity about what actually matters versus what just feels important. I learned this lesson watching my uncle during his final months with cancer. Before his diagnosis, he was consumed with typical worries, what people thought of his career choices, neighborhood drama, whether his lawn looked as good as his neighbors, office politics, and social media arguments. He spent hours each week stressed about things that ultimately had no impact on his life's meaning. But facing death changed everything instantly. Suddenly, those concerns evaporated like morning fog. He stopped caring about impressing people who didn't really matter to him. He ended relationships that drained his energy. He started having deeper conversations with people he loved instead of small talk about weather and sports. He focused entirely on what brought him joy and meaning. The most striking thing was how much mental energy this freed up. Without the constant background anxiety about trivial matters, he became more present, more grateful, and ironically happier than he had been in years, despite his circumstances. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced memento mori, remembering death, not to be morbid, but to gain clarity about life. He wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." He understood that awareness of mortality eliminates petty concerns and focuses attention on virtue and meaning. The Stoics viewed death as the great teacher. When you remember that your time is limited, you stop wasting it on things that don't align with your deepest values. You stop postponing important conversations. You stop delaying meaningful pursuits. You stop taking relationships for granted. This creates dangerous intelligence because while others are paralyzed by trivial anxieties, you can focus on what genuinely matters. You make decisions based on limited time rather than unlimited worries. You invest energy in relationships and activities that will matter when you're looking back on your life. The clarity is brutal and liberating. That argument with your coworker about the meeting schedule, meaningless. The anxiety about whether people liked your presentation, pointless. The stress about keeping up with social media, wasted energy. But time spent developing your character, building meaningful relationships, contributing something valuable to the world, and living according to your principles. These things matter because they define who you are and what you leave behind. Seneca wrote, "Let us examine ourselves and rid ourselves of the faults we have acquired." He understood that death gives urgency to self-improvement and meaning to our choices. The practice is asking yourself regularly, if I had 1 year left, would this matter? Am I spending time on things that align with my deepest values? What would I regret not doing? This final lesson transforms everything. It eliminates meaningless anxiety and creates focus on what genuinely matters in the limited time you have. This dangerous intelligence isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting yourself, making better decisions, and focusing on what truly matters. It's about being strong enough to handle truth and wise enough to use it virtuously. The Stoics understood that most people live in pleasant delusions that make them weak and predictable. When you embrace these ruthless lessons, you join the small percentage who see clearly and act wisely. If you're ready to develop this dangerous intelligence, like this video and subscribe for more Stoic wisdom. Comment below, which lesson hit hardest? Which truth did you need to hear most? Remember, real power comes from seeing truth and acting wisely.